integration strategies in the field of education, brought to you from Toronto and Zurich. We're going to begin with introductory remarks by Ulrich Kober from the Bertelsmann Stiftung in Germany, and this will be followed by a presentation by Lloyd McKell from the Toronto District School Board. Lloyd will be followed by a presentation from Céline Ondoul on the QUIMS program, the Quality in Multicultural Schools program from the Canton of Zurich. And then the session will end with a moderated Q&A with our experts answering your questions. Both the Toronto District School Board and the Quality in Multicultural School program have been profiled in our Good Ideas collection, where you will be able to find them online, along with lots of related background material and information that will allow you to follow up and learn a little bit more about these programs post-webinar. And please remember, a recording of the webinar will be available on our website, so please bookmark the page and share the archived recording with your friends and your colleagues. I'd like to tell you a little bit more about this project, about Cities of Migration. Cities of Migration is a web-based showcase of what we call good ideas in integration. These are profiles of innovative, successful integration practices from cities around the world. Local realities tend to trump national differences when it comes to the settlement and integration of immigrants. Good ideas, good integration practices travel. They can be replicated, adapted, and shared, and we have much to learn from one another. The learning exchange brings these ideas alive to an international audience and invites you to ask questions, make connections, and take a few ideas home with you. The Cities of Migration initiative is led by the Maitre Foundation, a private operational foundation in Toronto, which invests a significant part of its resources in improving the integration of urban migrants in Canada. Through Cities of Migration, Maitre works with an international group of partners from the UK, Europe, and New Zealand. We're very fortunate to be able to bring their expertise, insight, and influence to bear on this initiative. And we are, of course, always looking for new partners and new ideas, and we wouldn't be able to do this without our partners and the communities they represent. So in addition to good ideas in French and German, I'm happy to report that we are soon going to be bringing you stories in Spanish. I think you should see those starting in May, so please stay tuned for all of that. And now what I'd like to do is please invite you to join me in welcoming Ulrich Kober, Director, Integration and Education Program with the Bertelsmann Foundation. Hi, Uli. Welcome to Cities of Migration.
Thank you. Yes, thank you for giving me this opportunity, and I would like to welcome all listeners and participants to our webinar today. I think we all agree on that education is a key to integration, and this is true not only for children of immigrant origin, yet for them it's particularly important. Education attainment is a major determinant of an individual's future opportunities in life and in the host society. And integration through education, therefore, is a key challenge for all countries of immigration. If you look at the results of the PISA study, which has been, taken into consideration very much in Europe, not so much in Canada, but still it's very important for our issue, because the PISA studies show that in all OECD countries, first-generation immigrant students lag behind the native students. This is not a surprise, but you see the considerable variation among countries. And the second-generation immigrant students, you see that on the slide very starkly, they can close this achievement gap considerably, particularly in countries like Canada, England, Sweden, and to a lesser degree in Switzerland. You see, for example, that the attainment gap in Canada is closed from 19 points to 0, and England, for example, from 44 to 7 points, the Netherlands 65 to 61, the column then is Sweden 68 to 29, Switzerland, and the last column is Germany. And you see the attainment gap is not closed. Therefore, for us in Germany, this is a very burning issue. And we ask ourselves here, how do the educational systems in the countries which are successful produce these positive results? And we commissioned international research in the Bertelsmann Foundation in search of an answer. And we spoke with 100 experts and practitioners all over the world, and we traveled also to see the most promising programs and to find out the ingredients for successful integration through education. We discovered that the regional level is very decisive to bring about positive change. And the model that impressed us most was actually the work toward equity and excellence conducted by the Toronto District School Board in Canada. Their approach was so convincing that the board won the 2008 Carl Bertelsmann Prize. Compared to Canada, European countries are less enthusiastic about immigration, and they tend to underperform when it comes to providing equality and excellence for immigrant students in schools. Yet, for example, the educational work of a district like Zurich in Switzerland shows that success is possible, even in a policy climate that is less attuned to the needs of immigrant students. So in the end, what is the secret for integration through education? And in all models we found the following elements. First of all, at the societal level and as a consequence in the educational systems, diversity is appreciated and regarded as an opportunity and not as a disturbance or a problem. Second, the acquisition of the language of the host society is promoted at a very early stage, and not only at the start of a school career, but throughout the learner's biography. Third, there is the important issue of fairness. Schools which face serious integration challenges get more resources than other schools. Fourth, the teachers receive training and they learn how to teach diverse student bodies. They learn that individual support is the key for the success of immigrant students. Fifth, schools consider themselves to be the heart of the community. Therefore, immigrant parents are involved in their children's schools and some of their learning and social needs are met there. Schools are in fact part of an active and supportive network with services, civil society organizations, and local business even. So Zurich and Toronto provide you with concrete examples of integrative approaches to education. They embody the good news that immigrant students can succeed. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Uli. And thank you very much for the Carl Bertelsmann Prize and the work you've done to recognize these. So what I would like to do now is to introduce you to Lloyd McKell, who's the Executive Officer of Student and Community Equity at the Toronto District School Board. Lloyd, welcome to Cities of Migration.
Thank you very much, Kim, and welcome to everyone. I see on the list of participants a few people whom I recognize from the Toronto area and a few people from beyond, but I'm very, very privileged to participate in this webinar. Well, as Uli said, and I thank him for that, and the Bertelsmann Foundation for recognizing the work done in Toronto, in the city of Toronto, and in particular the Toronto District School Board. I think that everyone recognizes that Toronto is Canada's most multicultural and multiracial city, and in fact one of the most diverse cities in Toronto, in Canada, and perhaps in North America. The residents of Toronto and the regions around it, which is known as the Greater Toronto region, the Greater Toronto area, is home to people from over 200 countries of the world and speaking more than 150 languages, practicing many, many religious traditions. What this chart in front of you shows is a very small example of that diversity. It also shows some statistics related to the Toronto District School Board. The first statistic on the page tells you that about half of the people who live in the city of Toronto were actually born outside of Canada. And of the students within the Toronto schools, the Toronto public schools, 28%, more than one quarter, are born outside of Canada. And so this chart does give you a picture of the diversity. At the last nugget gives you an idea of the many languages. These are, I mentioned that there are over 150 languages spoken in Toronto. Well, here are some of the major groups that make up part of our Toronto community. Toronto is known as a city that has developed a successful model of integration of immigrant communities in our schools and our cities, and for that we can take some pride. Within that diversity, the city has achieved a fair degree of social cohesion, and also identifies itself quite proudly as a city for whom diversity is our strength. But having said that, I want our audience to know that this journey towards this successful model of integration is not an easy one. There are many challenges along the way for both minority communities. I think we should also begin to refer to them as global majorities. There are challenges for minority communities who are introduced to our mainstream cultures and institutions, but there are also challenges for the dominant mainstream cultures and institutions in making the accommodations necessary for successful integration. And I will address some of those challenges in my remarks. It is fair to say that if we are going to commit ourselves to creating a level playing field for all communities, we have to start with acknowledging the barriers that exist. For example, what's on your screen now is an excerpt from the Equity Foundation statement, or the equity policy, if you wish, of the Toronto District School Board. What this excerpt, or this paragraph, states is that we acknowledge that certain groups in our society are treated unfairly, inequitably, because of individual and systemic biases and prejudices related to a number of factors, such as race, culture, ethnicity, linguistic origin, and so on. It is important for us to acknowledge that people do face barriers, and those barriers come from issues of bias and prejudice that they face, and that in fact erect barriers for integration. We acknowledge that those biases exist in the society, and we acknowledge that those biases also exist in our school system. Now, our Equity Foundation statement goes on to state a number of commitments that we make to addressing that inequity, and you know, on the Toronto District School Board's website, www.TDSB, and that's the acronym for Toronto District School Board, .on.ca, you can access by doing a search for Equity Foundation Statement. You can find the full statement, which expresses the various ways in which the board expresses its commitment. So it's very important for institutions to express its values about integration, about social cohesion, about addressing inequity, because that belief statement, that value statement, that mission statement provides the foundation for the actions that we all take. Now, our mission, stated mission of the Toronto District School Board is to enable all students to reach high levels of achievement. And the operating word there is all, not most students, but all students, and all students of all backgrounds, identities, and heritages. The reality is that in our experience, despite our best efforts, that 75% of our students successfully graduate from our secondary schools. Now, some students do leave our schools prematurely and come back after working for a year or two and successfully graduate. But the percentage is around 75%. So therefore, the challenge is to close that achievement gap. And when we look at the statistics, when we look behind the numbers, we see that certain groups are the groups who are most predominantly at the lower end of our achievement ladder, and that includes black students, Aboriginal students, Latinos, Portuguese, students from the Middle East, and so on. So that's our challenge. The challenge is to close the achievement gap to the point where we have the same relative levels of success for all students in our system. I want to put up on your screen now just an example of the data that we have collected through a student survey that we call the student census, which we are committed to do every 5 years. We started this census in 2006, where we we surveyed, I should say, all students from grade 7 to grade 12. Grade 12 is the grade at which students leave our secondary schools. And we also surveyed parents of children from kindergarten, where they enter school, to grade 6. This excerpt on your screen gives you a small example of the perceptions of students of their environment. We asked students about 50 questions. 15 of those questions were questions about their background, their country of origin, their racial background, the countries of origin of their parents first language, their home circumstances, parents' occupation, etc. But 35 of those questions were questions related to asking students from grade 7 to grade 12, what do they think about their schools and their lives outside of schools. And this chart gives you a very small example of the comparative data for 5 of those students. And let's just take one of them just for purposes of illustration. Take the second one. I feel comfortable answering questions in class all of the time. Well, across the system, we found that of our Aboriginal students, or native First Nation students, 39% answered that question in the affirmative, yes. Of black students, 60% said, yes, I feel comfortable answering questions in class all of the time. East Asians or Chinese students from Hong Kong, from China, 52%. Latino or Hispanic students from Latin America, 55%. And white students or students of European English-speaking background, 70%. You can see a sort of relative difference among different groups. It is extremely important for us to identify how students feel about their environment so that we can change it. What's important about these kinds of statistics is that we have to look at both parts of the equation that add up to 100%. So that, for example, if we did say that if we found out that 60% of black students or students of African descent in Canada, in Toronto schools, say that they feel comfortable answering questions in class, it is important for us to ask those students what it is, what are the factors that allow them to feel comfortable. And for that 40%, we have to ask the same question. What are the circumstances that make you not feel comfortable in participating or answering questions in class? So this information is extremely important in helping us to have the kinds of conversations with students that we need to have in order to address their environment, in order to make changes in their environment. So I put that up just to demonstrate that we need to get behind the information and find out from our primary stakeholders how they feel about what we do. The achievement gap involves a number of key questions for us. First question, how will we define and communicate high expectations for all students? And one of the things that we have found is that the issue of expectations is critical in how students achieve. We have found that, for example, we have higher expectations for some students. We expect them to successfully graduate and go on to university or secondary school. And for other students, we may very well have lower expectations for their future. It's important for us to address that. Students pick that up very, very quickly. Second question, how will we ensure high-quality instruction and is consistently delivered to all students? We know that there are differences in teacher expertise. We're going to have to address that and make sure that all students in all classrooms have the kinds of strategies and approaches to providing differentiated instruction, high-quality instruction to all learners in the classroom. Another key question is, how will we ensure that all students are effectively engaged academically, emotionally, and socially? It is not enough to look at their grades, their academic results. We need to look at how they can connect with the adults in the school who care about them, who understand the issues that they are going through, and who can address those. And of course, schools need to be a place where students can find a degree of enjoyment, forming good positive relationships with their peers, lots of activities to participate in, and of course, how will we ensure an inclusive, welcoming atmosphere in all schools, and that is critical. Given our diversity, every student, regardless of his or her background, needs to go into a school every day and feel that this school is for them, about them, of them, in the same way that it is for every other student, and that's critically important. Those critical questions form the basis of the conversations that we need to have with our peers as educators and with others. And related to that are the questions that we need to ask when we look into the mirror, as opposed to out the window. When we look in the mirror, we need to. The conversations need to come down to these three among many. What is our personal commitment to the success of every student in our school? Do we see the success of every student intimately involved with our own success? Are we prepared to evaluate our own personal efforts in terms of the success of each and every student? Are we prepared to challenge our own assumptions about people, which determine our individual and collective actions, and that makes the case that we do have assumptions about people that we bring to our profession? And are we prepared to recognize and remove the systemic barriers that we erect for those who are less advantaged because of our positions of power and privilege? And we have to recognize that our positions of power and privilege bring certain actions on our part as educators that do not always work in the interests of everyone else. The systemic barriers, and these are just a few that exist for students from migrant communities, lower expectations, as I mentioned before, attitudes which sustain discrimination, such as racism, sexism, homophobia, classism, discrimination against people with disability, curriculum that does not reflect diversity. Every student needs to feel that what is taught and how it's taught includes them at the center of the instructional program, not at the margin. And all the way down to unequal parent access to school information and involvement. Involvement of parents is critical to student success. They need to be effectively engaged with teachers, but they also need to be engaged with the school as an institution in contributing to decisions that are effective for all students. The Director of Education has unveiled an approach that he has called a vision of hope. Without hope, without generating a sense of hope among students, we can't move forward, and therefore it's important for that to be the central overriding context for what we do in our classrooms and schools. Every school, the vision is to make every school an effective school in terms of the overall program to produce student success. Full-service schools, which acknowledges the fact that schools need to be places which partners with community agencies and groups to provide for the total needs of all children, the emotional needs, health needs, physical needs, so that the school is, in fact, the heart of the community. Building instructional capacity, as I said before, is critical. One of the strategies would be to take the best teachers and provide a way for those best teachers to instruct other teachers through what we call demonstration classes or classrooms. The education strategy for boys recognizes that boys, cutting across all cultural and racial groups, learn in different ways that are different from girls, and we need to take recognition from that. And all our data shows that girls are outperforming boys in just about every area, and we need to address that. Safe and caring schools, with the emphasis on caring. Schools need to be places where students feel an emotional attachment to all the adults there who care about them. Parent education programs need to ensure that all parents have the opportunity to learn about schools, but also to develop skills for effective parenting on the assumption that education takes place not only in the classroom, but also in the home. And we need to recognize the role of parents in being educators outside of school. And the Vision of Hope strategy involves us hearing from parents how satisfied they are about what we do, and we're developing for the first time a parent satisfaction survey which parents will complete and send back to us to give us their feedback on what we do. And so the 5 keys, just to sum up this presentation, the 5 keys to integration, as I think we understand it, involves committing ourselves to a vision of equity and inclusion, training all staff, teachers and support staff, to build awareness and expertise so they can do the jobs that they are assigned to do. We need to use information about our students for planning and decisions, and I gave you an earlier example of that. All stakeholders need to be involved in the change process. It's not going to happen only by teachers and by school principals and administrators, but students, parents, community members have to be involved in changing schools to a place where everyone can be successful. And of course, our leadership needs to be oriented towards change. It is very easy for leaders to orient themselves towards maintaining the status quo. We have to change that orientation, where leaders see themselves as people who would transform their environments into ones that are successful for all students. So finally, the lessons that we have learned from this experience is that it is important to use student data for planning and decision making. In other words, what we know about our students, how they feel about what we do, and how we can link who they are with their academic results and their social results, so we can be more precise in the planning that we do and in the decisions that we make. Caring and culturally sensitive schools inspire students and build public trust. And that is a truism that we have long recognized, that if students feel that our schools care about them, that they're culturally sensitive to their backgrounds, that they will be inspired to learn. And our diverse public will trust our schools to do the job that we are assigned to do. Developing leadership for diversity is necessary for creating inclusive schools. We have to train our leaders to recognize barriers that exist, to recognize their own prejudices, the assumptions they make, in order for them to be effective leaders for change. Distributing resources equitably across schools builds capacity to help the students who need the most help. And finally, collaboration between governments, the school district, and communities leads to successful schools and healthy communities. As I said earlier, schools can't do this alone. The challenge of community building means that governments, schools and school districts, and community groups, community organizations need to work together in order to build successful schools and in order to develop healthy communities. So I thank you for this. I believe that's the last, of my slides, and I look forward to questions later on.
I want to thank you, Lloyd, very much for that excellent presentation and the background you've given us to these issues. And I would like now to introduce you to Céline Ondoul from the Ministry of Education in the Canton of Zurich, who will talk to us about the Quality in Multicultural Schools program in Zurich. Welcome, Céline.
Thank you, Kim, for the introduction, and I also would like to welcome everyone and thank you for the opportunity that you give us for presenting our work on this platform. So I hope everybody can still listen one more presentation, and because it's pretty difficult to concentrate on when it's only the voice and the people are not seen. But I hope I will manage that. Today I'm going to present our program, Quality in Multicultural Schools, which is a program from Canton of Zurich in Switzerland. And I want to start with explaining a little bit the background of Swiss integration history and policy of Canton of Zurich. So starting from 1960s, there has been a really comparatively high ratio of immigrants in Switzerland. These were mostly workers with low qualifications. At the time being, it's like approximately 20% of the whole Swiss population is coming from different nationalities and do not have the Swiss passport. And the whole population, I should say, is around 7 million, so it's not a big country like Canada. It's like our department in Ministry of Education of Canton Zurich has like over 30 years of experience in supporting schools in the region of integration, and it is like not the Queen's program itself, but it's a general support that was provided. There has been some recent changes in the scenery, like we don't have anymore only these low qualified workers, but with the new agreements with European Union and global changes in economy, the number of qualified immigrants also increased. And the Canton of Zurich has the policy of integration, which at one hand supports the immigrants, but starting from 2000 also having expectations on them. Well, we said integration through education. This is also our topic today. The school system in Canton Zurich works with three different legs, I would say. This is the like the cantonal authorities and the local school districts or boards, and the schools themselves, which are the teachers and the students, of course. It sounds a little bit similar to that what Lloyd told before, that it is necessary that there is a cooperation between different governmental and local authorities. So in Zurich, or in Switzerland, I would say, we have different data suggesting some student performance according to PISA and TIM studies. Third International Mathematics and Science Study is the second one. Mathematics and science achievement of Swiss kids, or let's say the students in Switzerland, are good to very good, but in reading they are moderate. And the big problem is that the performance varies between different groups of socio-economical status. School reforms in Canton Zurich has been initiated with a change of law, and in these reforms also CRIMS program is anchored. So I want to talk a little bit about the characteristics of the program, which has a lot of similarities with Toronto, I realize. Well, the fact is quite clear that schools has a high ratio of students from migrant families, but also from lower socioeconomical status families, which are sometimes the same ones, but not always. And we have the risk that low achievers and reduced chances for these children well, the risk is that they are low achievers and there's a reduced chance for their career at school and in post-school life. So the challenge is to use the full potential of every student, and I want to emphasize this point that it is really of every student, so we don't really work only for the migrant population, but we try to achieve a certain quality for all the students in the school. And as Lloyd also mentioned, teachers with a high level of competence as well as a strong commitment is necessary to be able to achieve these aims or goals. So CRIMS program was a program which was between 1999 and 2006. There were 20 schools who took part on the project. It was a project phase on a voluntary basis. And later on, it was anchored with the new educational laws that it is now obligatory for all schools having 40 or more % of immigrant children from countries where the main language, official language, is not German. Well, CRIMS schools, they tried 3 new methods to support their students. They reinforce, and they are reinforcing reading. Individualized learning is important in the sense that we realize that the children are not at the same level, so we cannot instruct them all with the same material, so we have to individualize their learning. And parents are also, for us, an important issue that we really also encourage the active involvement of the parents. What we provide is professional assistance, like the officers of the program, like myself. We try to coach the schools in their work, and the program is all the time, I mean not all the time, but once in a while is evaluated, and we collect samples from best practice examples, and we share these with other schools and use them to improve the program. Nice thing is that the program is politically accepted and it is anchored to the new laws, as I previously said. So there is a governmental background which supports us, as well as the public which is supporting, because Switzerland is a highly democratic country. That there was even an election for this, and public said yes, we want that. And through the CRIMS program, we now reached almost 90 schools. We support with financial and pedagogical support. So how does CRIMS schools work? As I previously mentioned, a school gets to be a CRIMS school when they have more than 40% of children coming from migrant families or from the countries with another official language than German. They are introduced to the program, and at the beginning they have to self-assess their situation, and they get professional training for their teachers. On the organizational level, their existing structures are complemented with the introduction of a so-called QUIMS delegate. This is a teacher who is chosen from the teachers team, and this person represents and works for QUIMS, and they have also QUIMS teams, like also from the teachers who want to participate more actively. They work for the program in the school, and all these people, they get training, especially the QUIMS delegate. This person gets an intensive training of the school, and can, after completion of the training, gets a certificate of advanced studies. Then, on the next step, the schools plan their projects. They choose 2 projects to be developed and possibly to be established in the future. They make their plans for the next 3 to 5 years. And after implementing these projects, they also evaluate themselves. They use different methods to evaluate themselves. They use, of course, the students' records, but also they get feedback from different interviews and teachers' observations. And depending on the school, they have also different ways to evaluate themselves. So they are not really, they don't really have rules how they should evaluate themselves, but we try to support them with different instruments. So how are schools supported? I already mentioned a little bit. So consultancy is one point. They are consulted through qualified personnel who work in the Ministry of Education, and the way we consult them depends, like from phone calls to emails, and even on demand we go to schools. And networking is the other issue. We organize meetings 2 to 3 times a year so that schools can have contact with each other and learn from one another, which we also regard as very important. And training, as I already mentioned, that on the one hand the training of the QUIMS delegate, and on the other hand we also provide schools on-site trainings for teachers, the whole group. We provide them with documentation, which includes not only formal material like administrative forms and everything, but also content-related, pedagogical content-related documentation. And last but not least is the financial support. Per year, every school gets between 30 to 60,000 francs, which is equivalent to 20,000 to 40,000 euro, or if I say in US dollar, it's 28,000 to 56, I guess, and other currencies I didn't really calculate. But it is quite a big support, and the schools get this support according to their size, according to the number of students they have. There are 3 issues on which the schools have to work on, and this is the more or less the only frame that we give them. The 3 topics are, one of them is the language empowerment. This is something we really reinforce and want the schools that they work on. And this is achieved by establishing an intensive reading and writing culture in the schools. There are lots of reading and writing projects going on. Team teaching is another issue to support learners of German as a second language. We have special teachers for students who have German as a second language, and they teach together with the classroom teachers. And another way is to collaborate with teachers of minority languages. We have 2 to 4 hours a week minority language classes, and collaboration with them is another issue for the language empowerment. And we encourage also parents to support their children's language development. As previously mentioned, parents' involvement is also an important issue for us in the program. The second topic that the schools work on is enhancing the achievement. We already, both of us, Lloyd and myself, mentioned the low achievement problem. And here is also something which is already told from Canada, that the high expectancy and resource orientation is an important issue, that we don't really work deficit-oriented, but resource-oriented, and we expect more from these students than we previously maybe expected. Quality assurance is through individualized evaluation and instruction, progress planning and supporting of students, that every student has the possibility to work on his or her own way. And assistance is the support offered to the students to achieve the next school level, which needs a little bit maybe more explanation, because in Switzerland we have a highly selective school system. After the 6th grade, students are placed in 3 levels of secondary school, and for the highest level, it's like around maybe 10% of the kids that go to these schools. There are centrally organized entrance exams, and cream schools sometimes, sometimes give support in this. I'm sorry for the slide. Okay, the third topic we are working on is the encouraging of integration. We have here like building a culture of acceptance and equal opportunities in the school. This is very much about the school climate that what was also mentioned from Toronto, and developing the awareness of a school community feeling through school rules, rituals, and other measures. That is another issue. Managing conflicts and developing intercultural skills. These kids do live and have to live with each other, so they really need to develop their intercultural skills. Not only the local ones with the migrant ones, but migrant children also with each other have to communicate on a good way. And education towards a better understanding of democracy is something which the schools work on. And at last, it's the involvement of parents, which I also already mentioned. We try that the schools have regular contact, or the schools try themselves, I mean not we, the officers, but the schools are working in this program. They have regular contacts with the parents, and they inform the parents. They make events, they make parents' education, and they provide also intercultural mediators or interprets in the cases where the parents don't speak the local language. So what made the program successful? There was a question which was asked from Kim, so I've tried to put it together. These are some of the points that are so nicely the same as Lloyd already brought. So, but I have no trouble to tell them once more. I just really like to hear that success comes with the same issues independent of the country. So accepting diversity as a fact and as normal is one of the most important points to start with. And accepting the schools as learning and developing organizations is another issue which we have to accept and base our resources on. Schools are learning, schools develop their own programs. We have to give them financial and content-related assistance. They cannot do by themselves. They need this. And these three predefined areas seem to bring success. And if they focus their objectives on these areas, which I previously mentioned, it is a part of the program which brings success. And lastly, I've also have to point the interplay of different reforms that we are all having in Zurich is certainly also a point to mention. That it needs a background which a government who is behind the program and who supports the schools in different ways. So thank you very much for being so patient and listening to me. That is the end of my presentation. And yeah, I would like to have also time to answer the questions, although it was a little bit too long.
No, a wonderful presentation, Céline, all the way from Zurich. Thank you very much. That was excellent. Now we've formally concluded the formal part of our webinar. Now is when we get to go to some of the questions that have been submitted to us. We're running a little short of time, so we may, I think, go over the hour by a few minutes. And for those of you who cannot stay online to join us, please remember that this session is being archived and you will be able to get to some of those questions later. So let's start with our first question, which comes from Ismail Ahmed. Both topics discuss the issue of community participation, and Ismail asks us for examples of parent education programs. So I thought maybe Lloyd, would you like to speak briefly to that issue?
Well, very quickly, I think there are many areas that we can provide opportunities for parent learning in areas of school, what expectations schools have about children. Parents need to be involved in learning what those expectations are, so that and that it also provides an opportunity for parents to put out what their own expectations are into productive dialogue. Obviously, what schools programs offer and what they mean and how they relate to students' lives after school, after they leave school. That is, it's important for parents to understand that so they can support their children. But there are also, as I mentioned earlier, areas of parental skills in understanding their children, understanding the different stages of development and growth of young children from preschool to adolescence, understanding the issues that the teenagers and adolescents go through so that parents can be supportive of them, understanding issues of child behavior so that they can support their children in developing better ways of developing relationships, and many other areas that relate to how parents can play an effective role in supporting their children's education in the home and outside of the home, in the extended family, and in the overall community. Many subjects which parents can learn that will help them to be effective educators outside of the classroom.
Thanks, Lloyd. And Celine, I have a question for you here from Anna Sophia Heinz. She asks whether minority language classes are compulsory in all schools.
It is not compulsory in all schools. It is on a voluntary basis. So there is a huge amount of students participating, but it is not compulsory.
And Anna Sophia also would like to know who provides the training for the QUIMS, the selected QUIMS teachers.
Excuse me, I just kind of got out of the... Oh, no, okay, sorry. Who provides training for QUIMS delegates? It is the University of Teachers University of Zurich, or I don't know how they call them in English, but it is the institution that educates teachers professionally. They also provide these trainings.
Very good. I have a question, and Lloyd, do you want to comment on how you enrich teacher training to support your diversity initiatives?
Well, first of all, the teacher college faculties that train teachers before they're hired by boards all have, in the Toronto area at any rate, all recognize the need to include diversity training for all teachers, so they understand the context in which they will be teaching. But beyond that, when they become teachers, we train all beginning teachers. We provide them with equity training so that they understand the backgrounds of students that they will be teaching, but also that they understand strategies for teaching within diversity. They understand the issues that relate to barriers that exist within the classroom and the schools. They learn strategies for inclusive instruction, strategies for connecting with students, and for building better student engagement. That's an ongoing process, not only with beginning teachers, but are offered to all teachers and to support staff and to principals and vice principals.
Thank you. Now I have a long question here from Kelly Laflamme from the Endowment for Health. She asks Uli Coover what advice he has for communities where the school administrators may be open to integration, but the municipal leadership and members of the school board may be more concerned about the cost of newcomers to the public taxpayer. So why don't we ask Uli to respond to that question?
Well, I have a simple answer to that question. You have to tell the folks that not spending money in education is very expensive. I repeat, not spending money in education is very expensive, because if you don't invest, you will have to pay later for the consequences of this lack of investment. And you really have to make the case also for immigration for demographic reasons. At least this is true for Europe. There is another question from Belgium, for example, that they see a trend against diversity. This is true for many countries, but still there is no alternative, because all the European countries are undergoing deep demographic changes. So you also have to make the case for immigration, and you have to be clear and speak to the population. We need immigration in the future, and therefore we have to deal with diversity.
Thank you very much. Now I'm going to Ratna Ahmedvar here in Toronto has asked us for a short report on the first all-black school in Toronto, an interesting experiment that Lloyd will be able to comment on. But I think before we get to that question, I think the question that we'd like answered from both our guests today is, of all their sort of comprehensive approaches that they've taken respectively, what are the one or two ideas that others should take up as first steps? If there were one or two ideas, Céline, that you think are critical to moving this agenda forward, what would they be?
Well, I would say, depending on the schools themselves, taking their resources as resource and being in contact with them and planning ahead together with the schools, and not just from the desks that we are working on. So taking the schools on the board and working for them, together with them.
Okay, thank you. And Lloyd?
Very quickly, I think I would agree with that, but I also would say that we have to ensure that we have in place leaders at all levels who are committed to a vision of equity and integration, and who will hold themselves and others, those whom they lead and work with, accountable for taking actions that moves their schools towards that vision of equity and integration. In other words, the role of leadership is going to be critically important if we are to make any progress. We have to have accountability on the part of leaders to take us to the place that we want to go.
Just a further question for you, Lloyd. you've talked in your talk about the importance of leadership and diversity, and there was one question again from Toronto about whether the teachers in the Toronto District School Board are starting to look more like the students in their classrooms. How is that diversity we talk about in Toronto reflected amongst the leadership in the Toronto District School System?
Well, I'm happy to say that we've made and are making a lot of progress in that area as far as teachers are concerned. There are more and more teachers of color and who reflect diversity, who are, first of all, making the choice to go into the teaching profession, and then for whom there have been opportunities to become teachers. It is not to the point where we are completely satisfied. We have a long way to go. Our concern is that at the leadership level, the school administrators and the senior levels of the school board, we haven't got to that place of diversity that we need to. So we have to work harder at our promotion strategies, our mentorship strategies, so that we increase diversity not only among teachers, which, as I said, I think we've made considerable progress in, but at all levels of the school system.
That's great. Now we're running towards the end of our session. I'm going to take, I think, 2 more questions. I have a question from student Rebecca Toulis, who notes that you both mentioned a strong need for cooperation between local governments, school boards, teachers, community groups. She would like to know where you start. Where does that collaboration begin? What are your recommendations? Céline, would you like to answer that question?
Well, I would like to, but I'm not pretty sure if I understand her question. Where do you start? I mean, well, I don't know.
When you talk about involving the community, a broad, sort of holistic approach to implementing your program, is there any one group that is critical to getting things moving or making sure that these efforts can be sustained?
Well, for the efforts to be sustainable, we made the experience that it should be carried from all these institutions. Like, if we say as a cantonal government that this is good for the schools and the schools still are not carrying the program, then it does not work as well. And the same for the local authorities, the school districts. When they find the program also successful and when they work with us, then it is more probable that this cooperation ends up with success. That was what I meant with cooperation.
And Lloyd? How about
yes.
you, Lloyd? What would you?
Well, I think at the government level, obviously there's a public policy at the government level that has to support education in schools. We're happy to say that the provincial government or state government that is responsible for education in Ontario has stepped up to the plate in many areas, and first of all has developed itself an equity and inclusive schools policy for all 72 school districts in Ontario, and has provided the funding to support that. At the city level, municipal governments, they also see themselves as partnering with school boards. We partner for programs in the summer, for example, where the city government runs parks and recreation programs that support students, and we work in partnership with them. At the level of the general community, I think the trick is everyone to understand that you can't separate out the child or the student or the youth, that all the dimensions of what makes a student successful have to come together into a partnership, that the social, cultural, emotional needs of children that are supported in the larger community context have to work with schools so that the academic and non-academic side of students are brought to bear in a successful mission. And so everyone's got to work together. Where we start, we have to have our politicians, our elected officials begin that conversation, and our bureaucrats connecting and networking with each other so that we can all be on the same page.
Well, thank you very much. I think we're just going to have time for one short last question, a difficult question, so one that we'll just get a very short response from you. Tamar Kaim asks us to ask each of you to speak to the effects of national policy and legal context of immigration on their local integration efforts in schools. I think that specifically at Cities of Migration, what we know is that integration really is a local issue. It frequently notwithstanding national policy and national sentiment. So I guess perhaps each of you could just reflect briefly on whether the national dimension of immigration in your region has an impact on the work that you do in schools.
Absolutely essential in Canada, and in fact, the federal government in the early 1970s produced its official policy on multiculturalism in recognizing the integral place that people of different cultures beyond the English and French, who are the so-called founding nations, have in Canada, and that was important. That was an important signal for our national government to send to the entire society that supports integration, and that, of course, was also followed up by the provincial government. And these are political supports that are important, that also, in our context in Canada, cuts across all political parties. All political parties at the national level support the notion of recognizing the place of all cultures, all communities, all peoples who come from around the globe and who are now Canadians as part of the Canadian identity, and that's extremely important.
Right. And so then, would you like to comment on that question?
Yeah, I mean, in our case, it's a little bit more difficult to talk about national political way to support, because we have a program which is on canton space, and the cantons work in Switzerland quite independently from each other. On the national base, there are, of course, there's a lot of work also going on in integration, and but on when I call local districts, it is a little bit less than the canton, so it's more the canton support that we feel and get at the moment. It is therefore a little bit difficult for me to speak about the effects of national political situation right now. But it is certainly very important to have the politicians behind us, because as I previously mentioned, as important as it is that the schools work with us, it is also at least that important that the politicians carry the idea.
Well, thank you very much. I think we've run out of time. I would like to thank all of you generously for the contribution you've given us today. We're going to let our speakers and our participants return to their busy days in Toronto, in Zurich, in Gütersloh. And on behalf of all of our participants, I'd like to thank Ulrich Kober, Lloyd McKell, and Selin Aldo for bringing us their presentations and fascinating comments today.